My guest today is Bernie Nelson. You may not know him by name, but I'm confident you have heard his music. His songs have sold over 25 million copies with multi-platinum cuts on the works of major artists such as Conway Twitty, Ricky Van Shelton, Kenny Chesney, Wynonna, Colin Ray, Confederate Railroad, Miranda Lambert, Chris Christopherson, and many more. In today's episode, we talk about Bernie's new book, Honky, Tonk Angels, Stories of God's Influence on Nashville's Most Iconic Songs, which chronicles 40 hit songs, including The House That Built Me, I Can't Make You Love Me, Troubadour, and others, and how they came to be. In each story, there's a miracle of one kind or another that happens to bring it to pass. Every remarkable tale reminds us that, as the scriptures say, we have entertained angels unaware. And as you'll see, they're always at work to make God's will happen, even when it seems impossible. Welcome to Lifeology.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
I am looking forward to this. That was a mouthful for me to say, but it does even encompass, once again, everything that you've done. So once again, thank you for joining with us today. Did you always have it in you? Did you know that you were going to be a songwriter?
You know, I think even early grade school, I played around with songs, meaning I would take another song and change the lyrics early on. That actually got me in trouble in parochial school. We'll go there. But I did, through that process in the fourth grade of getting in trouble with the nuns, I did pick up on the fact that songs were powerful, and that lyrics were powerful. So when I changed the lyrics to this popular song on the radio, the kids, this is in the 60s, were digging it because it said something kind of, outrageous, but it was powerful. So I learned that.
Yeah.
And then I, of course, gravitated to songwriting later on in the late 70s and stuff.
Wow. What inspires you to write?
I remember I had a band and we were playing some terrible place in the middle of winter, like South Dakota or something. And the CMA Awards were on, and it was a Sunday night, so we were off. And I remember watching the awards show, and I told myself, this is the last year I sit here and watch the awards show. Somehow I want to be there. And, obviously by the grace of God, things happened, and I ended up starting in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, with 2 Hall of Famers, 1 million people, amazing people. And then that music opened doors for me in Nashville, and those 2 people opened doors for me in Nashville. And early on in the book, you read exactly where I landed, in the middle of Camelot. I mean, it was, if you could land in one place, this was it, because there weren't too many people there, but the people that were there were making huge dents in country music. And there was this huge shift. So when I got there, no one wanted anything to do with my songs because they were too country. And that goes every 5 years. Nashville goes through that wash cycle. And we just came out of it, in case you hadn't noticed. The last 5-10 years have been pretty funky. Anyhow, so all of a sudden, everybody shifted their style of writing and kind of landed to where I was at already. And
so you're already there. That's great.
Yeah, so it worked out really nice. And then I just had to learn how to write songs better and how to write better melodies. And I think my strongest suit then, and probably still today, is not so much the song as it is the content. In other words, if you write a tailgate pickup truck song, there's 1,000 of them. But if you write a song called Red Solo Cup or Honky Tonk Badonka Donk or Achy Breaky Heart, those are stupid songs, but people are going to gravitate to them because, 1, they're stupid, and 2, they're not your normal song. Or if you write I Can't Make You Love Me or The House That Built Me or Girl Going Nowhere, they're totally different subject matters. And artists are going to be drawn to that because, hey, that's something I hadn't thought to say, or that's something I wish I had written. And then they're going to call you up and want to record your song. So,
wow, that's amazing. I wanted to jump back to the part where you said you were watching the CMA Awards, and you said by this time next year, last time I'm going to watch it, I'm going to be there. How did you maintain that mindset and that focus, so therefore by the next year you were there? Because I think that's a really important lesson.
I'm a songwriter, I think, second. And first of all, I'm an entertainer. I've always been an entertainer. I'm from the show-off kid. But we do shows where we could do an entire night of just Bernie Nelson songs, but sometimes we just want to have fun, and we'll pull out a song that I had nothing to do with and do a cover song just to light the crowd up. And so I had a band, and we were really well received out west, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, the Dakotas, and we did really well, and we had a lot of fun. But through the process of band members not getting along and wanting to do more and more of my own stuff, and then after visiting Muscle Shoals, that's when the hook was set pretty deep. My first reaction, of course, was I'm not anywhere in the league of these guys, and why am I here? Why are they messing with me? And two, how do I get that good? And I remember my first night in Nashville going to the Bluebird and seeing the best of the best. And I called the band and said, man, we might have to put the band back together because I don't think I'm going to make it here, you know.
Wow. Interesting.
Fortunately for me, it didn't take 10 years. It didn't take 5 years. It took, my first cut was my first song I ever wrote in Nashville.
Wow.
And then I wrote one in a laundromat one night without a guitar. And my song plugger wanted nothing to do with it. It was too country. And I kept asking him how to get it to this one act. And finally he told me, he said, well, the producer's right across the street. Just walk over and give it to him. So I did. And it turns out that the producer's wife was the receptionist that day. And she'd heard me play this song out, and she loved it. And before I got back across the street, they had called and said they wanted it. You know, and
wow.
It was a valuable lesson. It taught me, one, to do my own homework and not to rely on just one person in that town to get it done. But when I went to that song plugger, he'd called me when I was on the road and told me that Conway Twitty had taken a song of mine. And so I moved to Nashville thinking I'm on a roll, you know. And then when I got to Nashville, I found out that Conway had passed on it. And I didn't know what a pass was. So I found out that Conway didn't record that song. And like 3-4 months in, I said, hey, man, when are you going to get me a cut? And he said, when you write more songs, you know. So relying on that one song that Conway recorded or wanted to record but passed on wasn't going to get me very far. So I learned that these guys were writing 2-3 songs a day, where I was writing maybe 2 or 3 songs a month, you know.
Oh, goodness.
And I jumped in, and then the floodgates opened. And by the grace of God, these monster songwriters would take the time to show me things, you know. And I learned fast, and they liked what I was doing, and they allowed me to peek behind the curtain, and it was really cool. So
that's amazing. When you look at the earlier songs that you wrote versus the songs you wrote now, what's different and what's the same?
You know, music changes, I think, over time. I mean, I don't think you could help me make it through the night recorded today, maybe. So music changes. And I'm ever grateful. I told you off camera about my Crystal Gale cut. And it's one of the songs I teach in one of my songwriting classes of how not to write a song. You know,
interesting.
It's one of those songs that's written more like a poem. And when I teach songwriting, one of my favorite sayings is that the best songs are just conversation put to music. And I try to do that. I've always been kind of a storyteller with my music, you know, and I've been a fan of those type of songwriters, Christofferson, Tom T. Hall. And I love people who can tell a story and make you feel like, you know, they've been reading your mail because they're hitting on every nerve that you've got. So, I think if anything else that's different, leaving Nashville 3 years ago, and prior to that, you know, I just took the filters off. You know, I didn't allow Nashville to pigeonhole me into what I should write and what I shouldn't write. And I forgot that that's what made me successful from the beginning was when Nashville told me you can't write something that country, no one's going to cut it, to just keep writing it. And I have a saying that good writers chase trains and great writers write great songs, knowing another train will come along at some point. So it's just and the beauty of it is I'm still learning, and now I'm in Texas, and I'm trying to saturate the Texas sound and the Texas heritage and the richness of the Texas music, and it's intoxicating to start all over again. So,
oh, that's inspiring. Bernie, I wanted to transition into your book, Honky Tonk Angels, Stories of God's Influence on Nashville's Most Iconic Songs. What inspired you to write this?
well, there were so many great stories, and without being sacrilegious, I had become friends with the songwriting gods. I mean, the biggest songwriters in the history of country music. They were my friends, and we were doing shows together, and I would sit next to them and hear them sing things like "You're Always on My Mind," give me a ticket for an airplane, and just sit there and just like, why am I here? So slowly we started losing those people, and I knew some stories that were kind of cool, but the main story that started the book never made the book. We just never had time to sit down and talk about it, even though I knew the story and was very much so there when it happened. There was a group called Bailey and the Boys in the 80s that were a pretty successful group, husband and wife. And Michael Bonagera, the husband, came into the publishing company one day where I was at, and my friend Craig Karp was standing there talking to me because he had a new girl he wanted me to sing demos for me. Her name was Faith Hill, and he wanted me to help Faith do some demo work and help maybe get her a record deal. So Craig Karp had written songs for rock group Kiss. So he'd written songs for Kiss out in California, and we're standing there. So Craig Karp is standing there, and Michael Bonagera walks in, and Michael's from Pennsylvania. And he turns to Craig Karp and says, "Are you Craig?" And he says, "Yes." He goes, "Well, you ready to write?" And there's a guy with a record deal standing there asking you to write that so they went upstairs and wrote a song, and they wrote "No Stopping Your Heart," which would go #1 for Marie Osmond, right? So when they finished writing the song, Michael Bonagera from Pennsylvania asked Craig Karp from San Francisco, "What part of Philadelphia or Pennsylvania you're from?" And Craig Karp said, "I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm from San Francisco." And Michael Bonagera said, "Oh, that's weird because I know some Bickharts in Pennsylvania." So he thought that Craig Karp was another writer named Craig Bickhart. And he just called him Craig. And they ended up writing a #1, and they didn't know each other. And he wrote the wrong song, hysterical. My Randy Travis song that he and Christofferson recorded, the song pluggers, I could hear them through the wall having a really hard time. They would start the machine, stop, start, stop, stop. So they weren't getting very far. And my publisher stuck his head out and said, "What's the song you wrote for Randy?" And I'd written a song called "Every Road That I Go Down." So he told our tape copy guy, a kid named Chris Latham, who was married at the time to a girl named Tricia Latham, who would later go back to her maiden name, Tricia Yearwood. So Chris Latham went upstairs and grabbed the first song that had the word "road" in it and brought it down. Mark put it on a reel-to-reel, and as soon as it started, Mark realized it was the wrong song. And as he was about ready to hit stop, Randy Travis, I heard him through the wall say, "Oh, I like that." And so he played the wrong song, and it made a 5 million recording record with my hero singing it with him with Christofferson. So that stuff to me, I started looking at coincidence, and then I started equating my belief in belief, and I was fearless when I got to town. I was fearless when I was on the road with my band. And fearless meant I had complete belief that I was going to be successful. Early on, I always achieved, what I set out to do, be it baseball or Cub Scouts, whatever. But you have that built in where you're going to be successful. So I had to apply that to Nashville. And I started believing in myself, mainly because I was getting songs recorded that I'd written by myself. And I recently had a revelation after a few months of down on myself, realizing that the people that opened the doors and let me come in after hearing 3 songs were some of the biggest people in the music business. And so I must have done something right back then for them to go, yeah, sign here, you know. And so belief and getting into the religious faith part about it, I think there's a true connection between what they call the law of attraction and faith. And throughout the Gospels and the Old Testament, I believe that that God didn't part the Red Sea. I believe that Moses parted the Red Sea because he believed he could.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You know, because God said, do this and it's going to happen. So he had complete faith. And then you fast forward to the Gospels, and you know, the centurion says, you know, can you heal my son? He said, can you heal your son? He said, how? He said, with faith. He said, will increase my faith. And he taught the apostles, if you believe this, you can make this tree go jump up in the ocean and stuff.
Yeah.
And then throughout all the miracles, Jesus thanked God, not for what was about to happen, for what he really believed had already happened, had already taken place.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think if you speak it and you believe it, faith is a powerful thing. And that's what this book is based on, is believing in God's timing, I guess. So I think I jumped ship there a little bit, but songwriting and like so many other things, you have to believe in yourself, or you might as well just, you know, put your pencils away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate all the, you know, the synchronicity or how the timing that you're talking about, because I think there's nothing worse than when an opportunity arises and you're not ready for it. So I'm sure I'm similar in how you believe as well, is that we put the hard work in and God opens the doors. God provides the opportunity, whether it's through bringing, you know, the wrong song or whatever it might be. But the whole point is that if you're not ready for something and working on your craft or working on whatever talents you have, then when that door does open, it's like, oh man, I didn't do my part. So I really appreciate this book here, as far as to really inspire people that, you know, especially if they enjoy country music, of course, to hear how these songs are written and to see the influence and the timing and the quote coincidences and the synchronicity of it. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, a lot of the stories are just, are you flipping kidding me? I mean, can I tell one of the stories?
Yeah, please do.
So Kenny Loggins of Loggins and Messina, and Kenny Loggins that wrote Danger Zone for Top Gun and all that, he'd never had a song recorded. And back in the 60s, they didn't have places to play out, some coffee shops now and then, but a lot of times they had house parties, and people would come over and play folk songs. And he played a song one night, and 2 guys from what would become the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band were there and loved this particular song that he'd written called House at Pooh Corner. But it talked about Winnie the Pooh, you know, and all that stuff. And so the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band was making this watershed record called Uncle Charlie, and they wanted Winnie the Pooh, A House on Pooh Corner, to be on the record. So he was very excited. He was finally going to get his first big break. And a month or so passed, and they called him and said that they couldn't record his song because Winnie the Pooh was owned by Disney, and Disney didn't want these hippie guys to record a song referring to one of their Disney characters. You have to remember, this is like 67, 68.
Sure.
So Kenny Loggins had a date lined up with a girl he had just met, and he called and canceled the date because he was very depressed. And she pursued him and said, what's wrong? And so finally he went out that night with her.
Yeah.
And so finally she said, well, what's this all about? And he said, well, I wrote this song and it's music business and you won't understand. And Disney shut my dream all to heck, you know. And And she said, so let me get this right. So you wrote a song, this band wants to record it, but Walt Disney won't let you record it, and that's the problem. He said, yes. And she said, well, why don't I just talk to Daddy? Her
What?
dad was her dad was the CEO of Disney.
Oh my gosh.
How do you make that happen?
Wow. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
she could have
incredible.
said, okay, you don't want to go out with me, phooey. You know, my dad's the CEO of Disney. I'll find somebody else to go out with, you know. But God put them together. He told his story, and she said, well, I'll just
Yeah.
talk to Daddy.
Yeah.
And like he was the head of the law, the law department at Disney and stuff. And it was done, you know, and that was that. And crazy stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's to hear that. I just because I was actually so I have a faith in God as well, and so this morning I was really in my devotions, kind of praying about some things that I was really want to see happen this year. So I think it was really, once again, kind of what we're talking about, this divine connection here, where I get to talk to you, I get inspired from that, and know that it's not one person or it's not everyone that needs to like us. It's just that one person that opens a door. And so with that, I'm looking forward to seeing how my own dreams come to pass this year as well. So I really appreciate your inspiration and everything that you're doing. With the book, Honky Tonk Angels, is it specifically about, so it goes through each song, and then it tells the backstory of it?
Very short stories, maybe 2 pages. I had several pictures of the songwriters, but because I didn't know who took the pictures, I didn't have rights to them.
Yeah.
So I hired an artist to sketch them, and they're very nice sketches. And then there's a little blip of the lyric, maybe 2 lines from the song. We were going to put all the lyrics to each song on one of the pages, but we found out that it would cost us $300 per song to do that through Harry Fox and all that. So one day when I found out that I couldn't use all the lyrics, I got really frustrated with God because we kept hitting walls. And I was at a gym in San Angelo, and I said, God, why don't you want me to put the words to the song in this book? I mean, the words are so important, God. I mean, people need to see the words. And I kept hearing the word. And then it came to me that God's word was a lot more important than the lyrics. So I would find scripture to go with each song and put that in there as well. And it was just powerful, you know.
Yeah.
The thing I think, if I could express to anybody, is that when God throws you a roadblock or makes you go left when you want to go right, get excited. Get crazy excited. Yes. Because that feeds the faith mechanism versus the fear mechanism. So when you get up and you're supposed to do something really important that day and it falls apart, rather than get fearful, like, now I'm not going to get that paycheck or whatever, get excited. Because God is literally moving heaven and earth right now to make something special come your way. And the way you wanted to go was not the way it was going to work. So, and it's hard because I've had people, you know, lose people through death and people through divorce and stuff, or lose their job. And I've just told them, man, you got to get excited, you know, get past the grief, but then get excited, because I have friends reach out to me and I don't know them. And they're like, you're spiritually speaking to me. What should I do? Get excited. You know, God doesn't want you in Panama City. You know, God wants to move you, and be prepared. Pack a bag, because it's coming, you know. So.
That's amazing. That's really inspiring. And I'm very confident that my viewers and listeners, as they hear this, that they too will realize that God's favor is on their life as well. Bernienelson, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on my show today. If my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to purchase this book, Honky Tonk Angels, Stories of God's Influence on Nashville's Most Iconic Songs, where would they find all this information online?
Well, I have a stack of them out in the shed. And as soon as the orders come in by way of my website, bernienelson.com, they usually go out within 24 hours with a signed copy and some kind of personal thing in there. It's just, the book is so easy to read. You can read a chapter, which is 3 pages, or you can read the entire book. And a lot of people get started and just buzz right through it, you know. So they can find it at bernienelson.com.
Wonderful. My viewers and listeners also know that I can't find this information any other place. Simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll have all of Bernie's information there. Bernie, thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on the show today.
Man, thanks for having me. Good stuff.